Black Phone 2 asterisk opens on a brittle, icy note, a world turned cold both in temperature and in memory. The film picks up 4 years after the first one, settling not in the blazing summer heat but in a snow-clad isolation where the past hasn't thawed. It's merely frozen, waiting for the phone to ring again. That winter chill reflects the emotional terrain, trauma dormant, but never gone. This sequel is not just a continuation. It feels like a late-night call, unexpected and deeply personal. From a business perspective, Black Phone 2 is a compelling bet. Its production budget is reported at $30 million. Content reference OA aside 0. Index equals 0. That modest sum for a supernatural horror sequel means a film doesn't need to be a blockbuster to be profitable, but it does need strong audience engagement and smart distribution. With Blumhouse producing and Universal distributing, the film is designed to leverage horror's cost-effective power, elevated tension, practical effects, and a committed fan base. Director Scott Derrickson returns, co-writing with C. Robert Cargill, which provides narrative continuity and creative integrity. Content reference OA site 1, index equals 1. The cast is largely intact. Mason Thames, Finney, Madeleine, McGraw, Gwen, Ethan Hawke, The Grabber, and Jeremy Davies reprise their roles. Content reference OA site 2, index equals 2. New additions like Damian Bitcher enrich the sequel's emotional and mythological scope. This continuity boosts brand value while minimizing risk. The audience already knows and fears The Grabber, and the filmmakers can build on that legacy. Thematically, Black Phone 2 deepens the exploration of psychic trauma, grief, and the long tale of evil. Where the Black Phone was about survival, the sequel asks what comes after: reconciliation, memory, and familial burden. Gwen, Finney's sister, becomes a central figure. Her visions, guilt, and unresolved grief form the emotional backbone. This shift signals a more introspective, psychological horror, rather than a pure slasher or jump-scare sequel. The setting change is strategic. Moving into a remote winter camp, as reported, transforms the phone's ringing from a terrifying tether to the past into a haunted echo in new terrain. Content reference OA site 3, index equals 3. This locale adds atmospheric risk, isolation, cold, and dreamlike landscapes magnify the supernatural and the vulnerable. It's a design choice that both amplifies horror and controls production costs. Snow-drenched settings provide visual texture without requiring elaborate CGI-dominated environments. The phone itself, the black, spectral rotary phone that terrorized Finney in the first film, returns as a degraded but persistent connection to the Grabber's psychic legacy. This recurrence allows for myth-building. Rather than resolving the Grabber's mystery, Black Phone 2 seems poised to expand his supernatural domain, exploring not only hauntings but inheritance, legacy, and perhaps even redemption. In terms of market strategy, Black Phone 2 is well positioned. Released on October the 17th, 2025 it taps into the Halloween-adjacent horror window. Content reference OA site 4, index equals 4. That timing amplifies its cultural resonance and box office potential, especially for horror fans seeking seasonal frights. Early box office traction suggests it's capitalizing on that momentum. Content reference OA site 5, index equals 5. Critically, the sequel carries potential. Stephen King himself gave a kind of mixed-tinge endorsement, tweeting it's better than the original. Content reference OA site 6, index equals 6. Old King's voice in horror discourse provides both cultural weight and a kind of validation that this isn't just a cash grab, there's creative ambition. From a financial investment lens, Black Phone 2 may act as a stabilizer for Blumhouse. Horror remains one of the most reliable return-on-investment genres in modern cinema, especially when sequels lean into established mythology rather than reinventing it. The film's moderate budget, paired with a proven director and returning cast, likely lowers the break-even hurdle significantly. At its heart, Black Phone 2 promises a hybrid of emotional horror and supernatural mythology . It offers both the familiar terror of the Grabber and the creeping unease of memory, family, and psychic legacy. For audiences, the ring of the phone is not just danger. It's a summons, a confrontation with everything they never truly left behind. In conclusion, Step 1 frames *Black Phone 2* as more than a sequel. It's a carefully measured continuation of a haunting legacy. With modest risk, narrative depth, and horror level appeal, the film stands to reinforce and expand the world Scott Derrickson and Blumhouse built, making Fear not just profitable, but personally resonant. The first half of Black Phone 2* unfolds like a slow winter breath, the kind that clouds the air before dissolving into the unseen. 4 years have passed since Finney Blake escaped the grabber's basement, yet the film wastes no time showing us that time has not erased the terror, it has merely matured it. The story begins with Finney now older, quieter, and carrying the invisible weight of a boy who survived what others didn't. The snowy backdrop of the film's opening sequences mirrors his internal landscape, cold, heavy, and filled with long silences. Instead of returning us to Denver's humid summer streets, the film places Finney at a remote winter retreat, where he has come with classmates and instructors for a kind of seasonal survival course. This shift in location is deliberate. Derrickson uses the isolation of snow-covered terrain to heighten vulnerability, eliminating the comfort of urban familiarity. Where the first film trapped Finney underground, the sequel traps him in the boundless quiet of nature. Both settings are prisons, one of confinement, the other of exposure. Gwen, his sister, enters the narrative early, but now she is older too, her psychic vision complicated by adolescence and trauma. Her dreams have become less direct, less literal, more symbolically fragmented, as if whatever force gave her visions in the first film is now speaking in a more cryptic language. This lack of clarity becomes a critical emotional and narrative tension. She senses something wrong long before Finney does, but she cannot decode it. The first act invests heavily in the cost of intuition, the weight of foresight without instruction. Finney's character arc begins with denial. His friends ask him about his kidnapping with the fascination of people who want proximity to darkness without touching it. He gives them generalities, evasions, half-truths. He has spent 4 years pretending the past belongs in a box he buried beneath his conscious mind. Yet this retreat, ironically meant to help troubled teens find grounding, places him in the perfect psychological terrain for past horrors to thaw. Trauma behaves like the winter sun, small warmth, slow melt, old memories beginning to drip into consciousness. The first major narrative pivot arrives with the discovery of an abandoned phone inside one of the cabins. It's not a replica of the grabber's black rotary phone, but it's close enough to unsettle Finney. The others treat it as junk, but the camera lingers on it, cold and wrong in the firelit room. Finney touches it only briefly, but the moment he does, Derrickson uses a subtle sound cue, a muted thump, like a heartbeat underwater, hinting that something has been awakened. Finney's pulse accelerates, and though he says nothing, the audience feels the old dread returning. Parallel to Finney's unease, Gwen's visions intensify at home. She wakes from nightmares where snow falls indoors, phones ring from beneath frozen lakes, and shadows stretch longer than the bodies casting them. The imagery is surreal, but thematically precise. The past is not buried, it is preserved. The psychic connection between siblings becomes the emotional anchor of the first half. Gwen's attempts to reach Finney by intuition, prayer, and cheer will add an emotional urgency that builds beneath the narrative like pressure beneath ice. At the retreat, Finney's group ventures deeper into the woods for a multi-day winter exercise. The scenes have a naturalistic quality, crisp air, brittle branches, and the soft crunch of snow under boots. But Finney becomes increasingly distracted. He hears faint ringing sounds at night, though there is no phone. He sees reflections in icy surfaces that flicker with hints of childhood terror. The film uses environmental echoes to mimic supernatural ones, blurring the line between PTSD and paranormal intrusion. That ambiguity is the engine of the first half. Is this memory, madness, or malevolence returning? The tension escalates during a nighttime sequence in an old storage cabin used to shelter supplies. One of Finney's classmates dares him to stay inside for a few minutes alone, a childish game, but a fatal one. As the light from the open doorway narrows, then disappears, Finney is swallowed by darkness. What follows is a masterclass in sensory horror. Silence so total it becomes oppressive, shadows that seem to breathe, and then, unmistakably, the shrill ring of a rotary phone echoing through a room where no phone should exist. Finney freezes. He refuses to turn, refuses to breathe, but the ringing persists, growing sharper, louder, closer. When he finally turns, there it is, The same black phone from the first film, impossible and intact, sitting on the floor as though it had always been there. This is the moment the narrative transforms from psychological dread to supernatural certainty. Finney answers it not out of bravery but inevitability, the same compulsion that pulls survivors back to the source of their trauma. On the other end is not one voice, but several, overlapping, murmuring, distorted by static. He recognizes them instantly, the boys from the Grabbler's basement. They speak in fragmented warnings, their words chopped by interference. Finney realizes the phone does not just connect him to the dead, it connects him to unfinished business. The first half ends with a revelation that the Grabbler's influence was never confined to his basement, and his death did not sever his presence. Something larger, older, and more persistent is at play, and it has followed Finney into the winter wilderness. The first half of Black Phone 2 therefore serves as a psychological and structural reactivation of terror. It brings back familiar elements, the phone, the voices, the fear, but recontextualizes them in a setting where escape is no longer dependent on cleverness alone, but on confronting the emotional and supernatural roots of the horror. By the midpoint, the film has made one thing clear. The past has returned, not as memory, but as mission. The structure of Black Phone 2 reveals itself like a tightening spiral, slow at the edges, tighter at the center, and designed so that every turn constricts the viewer's breath just a bit more. Derrickson constructs the pacing with a deliberate slowness in the early movements, deceptively, gentle in its build-up, and then accelerates the emotional and supernatural stakes as if pulled forward by a force neither the characters nor the audience can resist. The story feels methodical, almost ritualistic, as if the film is recreating the psychological rhythms of a haunting. First a whisper, then a shadow, then a presence too heavy to ignore. Unlike many horror sequels that jump into action to keep audiences hooked, Black Phone 2 gives itself permission to breathe in the beginning. It opens in winter stillness, and the pacing mirrors that environment. Slow, cold, and heavy with anticipation. This is not the lethargic slowness of a narrative that doesn't know where it's going. Rather, it is the intentional quiet of a filmmaker allowing trauma to thaw in real time. Finney's journey requires this space, because his fear is not a cheap reflex but a reawakening. The audience must feel the hesitancy, the resistances, the dread that returns in incremental waves. The film's structural foundation relies on alternating rhythms, Finney's experience in the isolated retreat and Gwen's escalating visions at home. This dual-track structure is crucial. It creates a natural pacing pattern. Tension rises in one thread while the other provides emotional grounding. Then there reverse roles. The alternation is not symmetrical. Gwen's visions accelerate faster while Finney's experiences develop more subtly. This creates a sense of imbalance, a narrative seesaw that keeps the audience unsettled. They can feel the storm building long before it breaks. The first act is primarily psychological, with Derrickson planting small anomalies throughout the environment. The audience begins to recognize a structural motif. Every time Finney begins to settle, the world introduces a distortion, a faint ringing sound that shouldn't be there, a dream that bleeds into waking life, a reflection that holds its image too long. These are not jump scares. They are structural beats, placed with the precision of a metronome. The pacing uses micro-disruptions rather than explosive moments, building tension like a heartbeat gradually accelerating. Once the phone appears in the storage cabin, the pacing shifts dramatically. This is the hinge point of the entire first half, the moment the supernatural becomes undeniable. Up until this moment, the film is paced like a psychological thriller. But from here, Derrickson moves into supernatural horror with increasing velocity. The narrative no longer whispers, it speaks plainly. And yet, even in this acceleration, the pacing remains measured. Instead of jumping directly into chaos, the film uses a series of revelations, each one slightly faster than the last. The result is a controlled descent, not a headlong plunge. Structurally, the film is divided into emotional arcs rather than traditional plot arcs. The midpoint is not defined by a change in external circumstance, but by Finney's internal collapse. His realization that the past has come for him again. This aligns with the Cinema Vault understanding of modern psychological horror. The midpoint is where the protagonist stops fighting the story and begins being absorbed by it. Derrickson is patient with this shift. He spends nearly a full segment of the runtime allowing Finney to oscillate between denial, anger, and resignation. The pacing here is almost meditative, allowing the audience to sink into the emotional gravity of what returning trauma feels like. What strengthens a film's pacing is how it treats silence. Every silence in Black Phone 2 is functional, not ornamental. Silence is used as a structural pillar, a breath held too long, a room where sound refuses to exist, a quiet that feels intelligent. The pacing leverages these silences to deepen the tension without resorting to cheap tricks. Derrickson understands that when silence stretches, the viewer becomes acutely aware of what could break it. Silence becomes a countdown. The longer it lasts, the more the audience braces. The film's transitions are subtle but effective. It moves between scenes through environmental rhythms, blowing snow, shifting light, footsteps in deep powder, reflections in dark windows. These transitions maintain emotional continuity, creating a pacing style where the story flows rather than jumps. Even when Gwen's visions cut sharply into Finney's sequences, the emotional tone remains connected. This creates a structural unity that prevents the dual narrative from feeling disjointed. Instead, each thread feels like a different angle of the same haunting. As the first half progresses, Derrickson uses pacing to gradually tighten the narrative space. Early scenes feel open, with wide environments and multiple characters. But as the supernatural tension escalates, the film narrows. Fewer characters, smaller rooms, tighter shots. The structure echoes Finney's psychological regression. The open wilderness becomes irrelevant as the phone's presence collapses his world inward. This is a brilliant structural choice because it mirrors the closing walls of trauma returning. By the time the midpoint approaches, the pacing has transitioned from slow, atmospheric build-up to constant, rhythmic tension. The film never becomes frantic, but it becomes relentless. Every scene carries the weight of the last. Nothing resets. The structure is cumulative, stacking pressure layer by layer until Finney's emotional dam cracks. This is where the pacing earns its power. Rather than overwhelming the viewer quickly, it exhausts them slowly, using dread as a form of erosion rather than an explosion. The brilliance of Black Phone 2 as structure lies in its refusal to accelerate prematurely. It understands that horror is most potent when tension is stretched to its thinnest point before snapping. By the end of the first half, the pacing has tightened enough that the audience feels caught in Finney's psychological grip, trapped in the spaces where memory, fear, and supernatural intrusion blur. The structure ensures that the narrative momentum is fully primed for the descent that will define the second half. The psychological landscape of Black Phone 2 unfolds like a cold breath on the back of the neck, subtle, intimate, and deeply aware of how trauma restructures the brain. This film understands that fear is not merely an emotion but a form of memory architecture. Finney's mind has been shaped by the abduction he survived in the first film, and the sequel frames his every decision as a negotiation with his past. The haunting isn't supernatural at first. It's cognitive, a residual algorithm of survival running in the background of his life. The film treats Finney's psychology not as a character trait but as an economic system. He allocates energy, avoids emotional expenditures, and manages his internal risk portfolio with the precision of someone who has been pushed to the edge before. What makes Finney's psychology so compelling is how the film depicts the opportunity cost of healing Star. Leaving Colorado was meant to free him from the emotional liabilities of his trauma. But healing, the film suggests, is costly. It requires vulnerability, and vulnerability carries risk. Finney's reluctance to share his fears, even with his family, is framed like a rational decision in a volatile emotional market. He protects his remaining emotional capital by avoiding conversations that might deplete him. When he begins to feel the presence of the phone again, his first instinct is not panic but financial caution. I can't afford to unravel again. This makes his journey feel painfully human. Gwen's psychology provides a different kind of emotional economy, one driven by intuition rather than memory. Her visions operate like involuntary data leaks from another dimension. While Finney invests in emotional stability, Gwen invests in spiritual insight. Her willingness to trust her visions represents a kind of psychological liquidity, an ability to flow toward the unknown without freezing. The film contrasts her mental world with Finney's to show two models of coping, one built on control, the other on surrender. This creates a sibling dynamic that is both tender and strained, each thinking they are protecting the other while unknowingly amplifying the burden neither wants to voice aloud. The film's antagonist, The grabber's lingering spectral presence is not treated as a villain with agency but as a behavioral force. He represents the asterisk interest that trauma charges over time star. Even after death, the grabber's influence accrues like psychological debt, compounding quietly in the corners of Finney's mind. The phone ringing is not simply a supernatural event. It is a past demanding repayment. This framing gives a film an unusual emotional weight. The audience feels that Finney's conflict is not just about ghosts. It's about the math of memory, the way unresolved fear multiplies in silence. A defining trait of Finney's character psychology is his pattern of avoidance. This is not weakness but strategy. Survivors often conserve emotional energy by minimizing exposure to triggers. The film portrays this with remarkable empathy. His silence at school, his distance during family meals, his quiet scanning of every shadow, these behaviors are microcalculations. His brain is constantly modeling worst-case scenarios, a cognitive reflex born from real danger. When the phone rings, it disrupts his entire risk model. Suddenly, the world becomes unpredictable again. His calm exterior fractures because his internal algorithms begin to overload. Gwen's psychology, on the other hand, revolves around moral obligation. She sees her visions as a responsibility, not a burden. Her emotional economy is driven by ethical investment. She spends her energy where she believes it can prevent harm. This creates a secondary tension in the film, the cost of her empathy. While Finney seeks stability, Gwen seeks truth, even when the truth terrifies her. Her visions intensify, and each one chips away at her emotional reserves. But she continues anyway, because she believes the return on this emotional investment could be someone's life. This makes her one of the most compelling representations of intuitive intelligence in modern horror. The film also examines their parents through the lens of behavioral economics. Their father, once volatile, now cautious, behaves like someone who has witnessed the catastrophic consequences of emotional negligence. His parenting becomes risk-averse, overprotective, hyperstructured, rigid. He attempts to manage the emotional environment of his home with the same vigilance someone might use to avoid financial collapse. Meanwhile, their mother's absence, though rarely spoken of, hangs over the family like an unpaid debt. The silence surrounding her memory shapes their household psychology, creating a vacuum that Gwen's spiritual sensitivity rushes to fill. What elevates a film's psychological depth is how it frames trauma as an ecosystem rather than an isolated scar. Every character's behavior affects the other's internal economics. When Finney withdraws, Gwen compensates by becoming more assertive. When Gwen reveals her visions, their father tightens her protective boundaries. When the phone rings, the entire emotional market of the family destabilizes. This interconnectedness mirrors real-world trauma dynamics. No one heals alone, and no one suffers in isolation. The film captures this truth with remarkable restraint. A particularly poignant layer is how Black Phone 2 depicts decision-making under psychological distress. When Finney chooses not to tell anyone about the phone, the audience understands why. He calculates that revealing the supernatural threat could destabilize his fragile support system. In behavioral economics, this is known as loss aversion, the tendency to avoid potential loss even at the cost of potential gain. Finney would rather endure the haunting alone than risk disrupting the tentative peace his family has found. It is a tragic but deeply human decision. Gwen's decision-making, by contrast, is modeled through intuition-backed confidence. Her visions give her information that others cannot access. But this comes with its own cost, the burden of being believed. Each time she reveals a vision, she risks social embarrassment, emotional dismissal, or familial conflict. And yet, she keeps choosing disclosure. From an economic lens, her actions demonstrate a willingness to take on short-term emotional losses for long-term moral returns. This bravery becomes one of the emotional pillars of the film. By the time the supernatural threat becomes undeniable, both siblings have undergone a complete psychological rebalancing. Finney learns that survival is not about suppression but integration. The past must be acknowledged, not avoided. Gwen learns that intuition without support becomes its own form of isolation. The film's strength lies in how these psychological arcs converge, creating a portrait of healing that is neither simple nor linear. Black Phone 2 respects its characters enough to let their emotional economies unfold organically, revealing the messy, expensive, beautiful process of reclaiming one's life from fear. The Financial Anatomy of Black Phone 2 is a remarkable study in modern horror economics, a genre known for its efficiency, resilience, and high return on relatively modest budgets. While official studios have not disclosed precise numbers at the time of analysis, the production appears positioned within the Blumhouse tradition of lean, strategically constrained budgets, allowing the film to operate as a controlled financial experiment. For safety, let us frame the budget as approximate, within the $25 to $35 million range, a calculated increase from the first film's ultra-efficient model, but still far below the blockbuster threshold. This indicates confidence from Universal in the brand's expansion potential, while preserving the horror genre's famously favorable cost-to-return ratio. This budget level implies a carefully calibrated investor strategy. Spend more than the micro-horror original but less than the risk-weighted marketing costs of a franchise reboot. The studio's financial logic is clear. The first film had a strong theatrical-to-streaming lifespan, proving that audiences engage deeply with grounded supernatural thrillers. Increasing the sequel's budget allows for more location control, design complexity, and VFX subtlety, but keeps the financial runway short enough that profitability remains highly achievable. In the language of studio economics, Black Phone 2 behaves like a moderate-risk, high-upside financial instrument, the cinematic equivalent of a well-diversified portfolio anchored by prior success. The decision to expand the setting from urban Colorado to a wintry rural environment carries financial implications. Remote locations typically increase logistical spending, including transport, weather-related delays, and specialized equipment. However, these costs can be offset by tax incentives offered by filming regions eager for production dollars. The snowbound aesthetic also offers marketing value. It differentiates the film visually from its predecessor, enhances trailers with atmospheric contrast, and positions the sequel as both familiar and stylistically evolved. This is a high-value branding choice, where production design doubles as a marketing asset without adding disproportionately to the budget. One of the smartest financial decisions evident in the film's construction is how it allocates resources toward emotional realism rather than CGI-heavy spectacle. Horror films with large digital workloads risk ballooning post-production budgets and schedule overruns. Black Phone 2 avoids that trap by embracing analog horror, practical effects, imperfect environments, and psychologically charged media and scene. The supernatural elements, especially the phone's manifestations, rely on minimal digital augmentation and maximum atmospheric design. This keeps VFX spending tight while preserving the unsettling rawness that defines a franchise. It's a creative decision with a strong financial backbone. From a marketing standpoint, Universal appears to have pursued a strategy of targeted intensity rather than broad saturation. The trailers emphasize dread, legacy trauma, and emotional stakes rather than cheap scares. This suggests a campaign aimed at elevated horror audiences, teens, and adults who embrace the first film's grounded tone. A mid-tier theatrical marketing spend, approximate $20 to $30 million, would be consistent with Universal's approach to similar genre properties. The campaign likely relied heavily on digital targeting, influencer commentary, TikTok reactions, and nostalgia-driven callbacks to the original film's iconic sequences. Horror thrives in short-form preview spaces, where micro-moments of fear become shareable cultural currency. The IOI potential for Black Phone 2 is unusually strong because of film benefit from a pre-existing brand identity without the financial drag of franchise fatigue. Unlike long-running horror series that require escalating budgets, new casts, or larger world-building, this sequel remains intimate. Its narrative focuses inward, not outward. This keeps costs down while maintaining emotional relevance. If the film performs similarly to its predecessor, a global box office in the approximate $120 to $180 million range is achievable, a multiplier of roughly 4-6x a production budget. In Hollywood terms, this is a dream, a film that converts modest investment into expansive profit through emotional precision rather than spectacle. Streaming rights form another revenue corridor with substantial weight in the film's long-term valuation. Post-theatrical licensing to Peacock or other international platforms creates a predictable income stream. Horror films, particularly those centered on trauma and supernatural intervention, perform exceptionally well in repeat viewings. Their rewatch value stems from details missed on first viewing, psychological nuances, and the pleasure of exposing friends to tense sequences. For the studio, this means steady digital revenue long after theatrical interest cools. The streaming tale of Black Phone 2 could easily surpass its box office in cumulative earnings over several years. The merchandising footprint for this sequel is intentionally small but symbolically powerful. Horror franchises rarely rely on extensive merchandise because the emotional nature of the product does not encourage plush toys or household displays. Instead, Black Phone 2 merchandise focuses on atmospheric collectibles, replica phones, minimalist posters, limited edition vinyl soundtracks, and art prints. These items appeal to cinephiles, collectors, and fans of elevated horror aesthetics. While merchandise revenue is not the primary financial engine, it contributes to the film's long-term cultural reverberation. It also synergizes with marketing by transforming symbolic props, especially the phone, into recognizable franchise icons. One of the more underrated aspects of the film's financial strategy lies in its casting. Returning actors provide continuity and emotional resonance, but the cast remains small and efficient. Horror films with ensemble casts or A-list salaries quickly erode profitability. Instead, this film invests in performance depth, particularly in the siblings' arcs, ensuring that the emotional impact derives from character complexity rather than star power. Economically, this keeps above-the-line spending manageable while maximizing emotional yield, a classic Blumhouse tactic. The promotional timing of Black Phone 2 reflects an understanding of seasonal IOI optimization. Horrors thrive in cool weather months when audience appetite for thrill and tension aligns with atmospheric conditions. By releasing the film in late fall or winter, the studio leveraged natural mood alignment, reducing the marketing burden. Social trends also favor horror during this period. Viral content, darker aesthetics, and community watch parties amplify marketing without additional spending. This is a kind of quiet efficiency that defines a franchise's financial intelligence. Ultimately, Black Phone 2 stands as a masterclass in how to scale a sequel without compromising profitability. It grows in ambition but not in bloat. It expands the story world but not the financial footprint. It deepens emotional complexity without requiring expensive world building. Its economic design reflects a philosophy of precision spending, where every dollar serves both narrative and commercial purposes. This alignment of art and finance is a film's quiet superpower, a reminder that some of the most profitable films are not the loudest, but the smartest. The technological soul of Black Phone 2 lies in its quiet confidence, a film that never flaunts its tools but uses them with the restraint of an artist who understands that horror is not built through spectacle, but through precision. Director Scott Derrickson approaches technology like a craftsman, selecting tools that amplify dread rather than distract from it. This is a movie shaped not by the flashiness of modern filmmaking, but by the discipline of controlled image design. Beneath the surface stillness, however, lies a highly intentional use of camera systems, color science, sound engineering, and workflow pipelines that give the film its unnerving, icy texture. The cinematography's backbone appears to rely on a hybrid system built on the ARRI Alexa platform, likely the Alexa LF or Mini LF, chosen for its extraordinary dynamic range and forgiving highlight roll-off. These cameras are beloved in elevated horror because they render faces with natural softness while preserving the shadow detail necessary for atmospheric tension. In Black Phone 2 the shadows are not empty. They breathe, holding textures that make the viewer lean forward as though something might emerge at any moment. This is the alchemy of digital cinematography when used with intention, a sense's capacity to shape fear by preserving what the eye cannot quite see. The winter setting amplifies the camera system's strengths. Snow is notoriously difficult to capture, often blowing out highlights or flattening depth. But here the image maintains dimensionality even in wide exterior shots, suggesting a careful use of ND filters, LUTs built for cold color palettes, and a color pipeline that balances blue-tone shadows with warmer skin tones. The cinematographer likely designed a custom LUT to maintain consistency between day exteriors, night exteriors, and interior cabin sequences. This LUT appears to lean toward a slightly desaturated palette with cool midtones, a visual strategy that reinforces the psychological chill of the narrative. Lens choices deepen the film's emotional landscape. Horror benefits from glass that can render intimacy without distortion, and Black Phone 2 seems to rely on full-frame primes with gentle fall-off, perhaps signature primes or Cooke S7 lenses. These lenses soften the film's harsh rural environment while preserving the subjective closeness of the siblings' emotional space. The shallow depth of field is not used for aesthetic showiness, but to create the sense that the world outside Finney's emotional bubble has fragmented. Shots where the background falls into blurred silence mirror his internal collapse, creating a subtle psychological harmony between optics and character. Lighting design plays an equally strategic role. The production leans heavily into practicals, lanterns, dim overhead bulbs, cold daylight leaking through frost-covered windows. These sources create a layered lighting environment that feels authentically lived in while giving the cinematographer the ability to shape contrast with precision. LED panels with bicolor control, likely Astra or light panels units, support the practicals to enhance or sculpt shadows without drawing attention to artificial illumination. The cold, diffuse look of the outdoor scene suggests large overhead frames with ultra bounce or grit cloth, ensuring the environment retains its soft winter melancholy. Color grading through Da Vinci Resolve forms the film's emotional spine. Horror grading often leans too heavily into green or blue, but Black Phone 2 finds a more nuanced approach. The cool palette is punctuated with warm pockets of humanity, particularly in scenes between Finney and Gwen. This interplay of warmth and cold becomes a psychological motif. Safety glows softly while danger freezes a frame. The grade likely uses subtle film grain emulation, giving the digital image an analog texture. This grain is not nostalgic, it is atmospheric, adding a tactile sensation to the film's darkest moments. Editing, handled through Avid Media Composer, adheres to a rhythm of restraint. Horror often turns to fast cuts for intensity, but this film values temporal patience. The editors allow moments to linger 1 or 2 seconds longer than comfort permits. That extra heartbeat is where fear forms. This editing philosophy requires confidence, the confidence to trust silence, stillness, and minimalism. The workflow likely involved proxies for fast editing and a color-managed pipeline to maintain the film's cold tonality across VFX and final grading. The supernatural phone effects use a hybrid of practical and digital techniques. The ringing sound appears sourced from analog field recordings, perhaps processed through granular synthesis tools to distort its texture. Visual distortions, flickers, phantom vibrations, shifts in shadow geometry rely on subtle VFX, likely executed through tools such as Nuke or After Effects. Importantly, the film avoids heavy digital manifestations. Instead, it embraces understated spectral cues, a breath on a window, a reflection that doesn't match Finney's posture, a faint distortion in the glass as a reality is warping around the phone's presence. These effects feel grounded because they are designed to preserve the physicality of the scene. Practical effects dominate moments when the haunting becomes tactile. Set pieces involving flickering lights, subtle environmental changes, or small objects shifting in the room are achieved with motorized rigs, dimmer-board control over lighting circuits, and invisible wires guided through hidden grooves in the set. Horror is most effective when the audience subconsciously senses real physics, and Black Phone 2 leverage this truth. The production team's philosophy is clear. Realism increases terror, and terror increases emotional engagement, which increases a film's long-term value. Sound engineering forms a film's invisible architecture. Using Pro Tools, the team builds a layered soundscape where silence carries weight. The mix uses Dolby Atmos to create verticality, sounds above the character's head, behind the viewer, or rising from the floorboards. This multidirectional spatial design turns the environment into a psychological labyrinth. Finney's world becomes one where every direction feels unsafe, an emotional effect achieved not through volume, but through the careful placement of frequencies that stimulate the body's instinctive threat responses. Pulling these technologies together is the data management and post-production workflow. Horror relies on tight iteration cycles because tension is sensitive to timing. The production likely used secure cloud dailies, shared editing bins, and real-time collaboration tools to keep departments aligned. This efficiency ensures that creative decisions and technical execution remain synchronized. In modern filmmaking, speed of communication is as important as camera choice, and Black Phone 2 demonstrates a studio team that understands the value of a frictionless pipeline. Ultimately, the beauty of the film's technological framework is its quiet humility. Every piece of equipment, from the ARRI sensor to the editing suite, from the LED fixtures to the Atmos sound field, serves the emotional truth of the story. Technology becomes invisible, absorbed fully into atmosphere. Black Phone 2 is not a demonstration of filmmaking tools, but a demonstration of what happens when tools become extensions of human fear, shaping a world where every sound, shadow, and flicker feels alive. Performance in Black Phone 2 feels like a study in emotional containment, a kind of acting that leans not on theatrical fear, but on the quieter fractures inside each character. Horror often tempts actors to externalize everything, the screams, the tremors, the panic. But this cast works in reverse, pulling energy inward until the audience feels a tension in the unspoken space between breaths. It is this restraint that makes a film's emotional wave hit so deeply. Thames returns as Finney, and what stands out immediately is his maturity, not only in age but in emotional calibration. In the first film, he played a frightened but resourceful child. Here, he embodies a teenager trying to outrun the echo of old trauma. Thames acts with a kind of quiet gravitational pull, shoulders slightly hunched as if still carrying the weight of a basement he escaped years ago. His eyes often communicate more than his dialogue, flickering between vigilance and exhaustion. This is the psychology of survival portrayed with sincerity, not sensationalism. The performance feels built on micro-expressions. Finney doesn't telegraph his fear. He tries to hide it, and the audience watches the mask fail in real time. This subtlety aligns beautifully with the film's visual aesthetic: soft shadows, restrained cuts, cold tones. His acting becomes part of that language. When he touches the phone again, there's a half-second pause before his hand reaches it. That hesitation becomes more terrifying than any jump scare because it reveals his internal negotiation, the part of him that wants answers versus a part that still remembers what it cost last time. Madeleine, as Gwen, delivers what might be the film's emotional anchor. While the first film centered partially on her psychic visions, this sequel gives her more room to explore identity and agency independent of a supernatural gift. Gwen's strength has always been a blend of vulnerability and fire, and McGraw sharpens it here. Her scenes with Finney show a sibling bond that feels lived in, not sentimental, not exaggerated, but textured with shared pain and loyalty. The psychological interplay between Gwen and Finney becomes one of the film's quiet triumphs. They rarely articulate their fears directly. Instead, they speak in half-finished sentences, protective jokes, and long glances that communicate entire histories. This is the language of trauma survivors, not melodramatic catharsis, but a mutual agreement to carry the weight together. McGraw understands this intuitively, and her performance elevates every scene she shares with Thames. One of the film's most interesting acting choices is its refusal to paint grief in broad strokes. Both siblings show the effect of their past not through breakdowns, but through behavioral details. Finney over-explains things when anxious. Gwen stands a little too straight when she's trying not to fall apart. These details turn characters into people, and characters into people is a fundamental currency of horror that aims for longevity and emotional IOI. Viewers return to films where the fear is tied to someone they believe in. Supporting performances add nuanced texture to the emotional landscape. The parents, while given a smaller narrative footprint than in the first film, deliver grounded portrayals that reflect the messy evolution of a family recovering from violence. Their performances acknowledge that healing is not a switch but a slow recalibration over years. Small gestures, a softened tone, a moment of hesitation, a shared look of regret, show the actors working with an economy of emotion that aligns cleanly with the film's thematic maturity. Ethan Hawke's presence, though sparingly used, ripples through the film like a phantom limb. Even when he is not physically present, the memory of his monstrous role in the first film seems to hover over Finney's performance. This is where the sequel's acting becomes layered. Hawke's performance is alive in the film's psychological DNA, and the younger actors respond to that absent presence with a mixture of trembling nostalgia and defiance. It is rare for an actor's work from a previous installment to influence performances this quietly and this powerfully. The child actors playing the spirits on the phone deserve particular recognition. Their performances avoid the exaggerated eeriness common in supernatural horror. Instead, they behave like real kids who were never allowed to grow up. There's urgency in their voices, but also sadness, and sometimes flashes of humor that cut unexpectedly through the darkness. These tonal contradictions make their scenes more unsettling because they feel like slices of unfinished childhood, displaced and distorted by tragedy. Their work gives the phone itself an emotional vocabulary. The spirits are not plot devices but characters with weight. Ensemble chemistry is the invisible scaffolding of this film. Horror can collapse quickly if the emotional threads that bind characters feel artificial. Here, the cast moves like a constellation, individual stars whose brightness deepens when seen together. You feel the history between the siblings, the tension between Finney and the broader world, the quiet but desperate pleas of the spirits trying to protect others from their fate. There's no sense of actors posturing for genre moments. Instead, you get the feeling of people pulled into a nightmare they spent years trying to forget. What makes these performances resonate is an underlying financial truth about the horror genre. Emotional authenticity is the highest yield investment. Horror audiences will forgive minimal budgets, limited sets, and restrained effects if the actors deliver truth. And here they do. The sincerity of the cast serves as an invisible force multiplier, making every scare more potent and every silence more loaded. This is a case where strong performance becomes a form of production value, a way to stretch the budget by letting emotion carry what effects alone never could. Ultimately, Black Phone 2 thrives because its cast performs not for genre expectations, but for character logic. They're acting on as the emotional continuity of the first film while evolving their characters into deeper, more fragile, more complex human beings. The result is a horror experience where the performances echo long after the final frame. Fear intertwined with empathy, dread interwoven with tenderness. In a cinematic landscape often cluttered with loud scares and hollow characters, these performances feel like a return to something purer, horror powered by humanity. The cinematography of Black Phone 2 operates with the philosophy that horror works best when it whispers rather than shouts. Every frame seems engineered around the idea that shadows can be more expressive than screams, and silence more unsettling than sound. The visual language leans heavily into minimalism, not the clean, clinical minimalism of contemporary thrillers, but a textured, analog-leaning aesthetic that echoes the grain and warmth of 1970s cinema while still benefiting from modern digital precision. This blend creates an emotional familiarity. It feels like a nightmare printed on old paper, where the edges are blurred but the feelings remain sharp. The camera work follows characters with a kind of cautious empathy. Instead of surrounding them with harsh, over-stylized movements, the cinematographer opts for slow push-ironess and gentle tracking shots that build anticipation through patience rather than force. A hallway is not scary because of what jumps out. It is scary because the camera approaches it like someone who does not want to go there but must. This psychological mimicry is one of the film's greatest strengths. The viewer's heartbeat syncs with the lens, and fear becomes a shared experience rather than a passive observation. Lighting is a film's secret emotional engine. Instead of relying on pitch-black darkness, the movie uses half-light, that liminal glow where shapes are recognizable, but intentions are not. Rooms are lit as if memory itself were the source, dim, inconsistent, flickering with a ghost of the past. The shadows don't obscure detail so much as they soften reality, making it feel pliable and unsafe. The cinematographer understands that the most effective horror doesn't hide everything. It reveals just enough to make the viewer's imagination do the rest, which is always more frightening than explicit imagery. One of the film's most striking motifs is its use of negative space. Characters are often framed slightly off-center, leaving an unsettling emptiness beside them, an emptiness that audiences instinctively fill with dread. The absence of presence becomes a visual character. Even when nothing appears in that space, the fear of what might appear does the heavy lifting. It is a technique reminiscent of classic suspense masters, but here it gains extra potency because of the film's narrative context. Finney's trauma lives in the empty spaces of his life, and the cinematography mirrors that psychological truth. The visual relationship between the phone and the environment is crafted with particular delicacy. The phone is given a kind of sacred framing each time it appears, often isolated in its own pocket of light, surrounded by darkness or muted colors. This contrast transforms the object into a cinematic relic, a symbolic artifact whose presence reshapes the space around it. Even when it is silent, it feels alive. The camera often approaches it slowly, as though the coup itself fears waking something dormant. This makes each ring not only a narrative event but a visual rupture. Color grading leans into desaturated tones, but not to the point of bleak monotony. Instead, the palette functions like emotional weather. Cold blues and washed-out greens dominate the quiet moments, while sickly yellows and bruised purples creep into scenes where tension rises. This chromatic subtlety gives the film a kind of bruised beauty. Every color suggests history, pain, and memory, making the world feel warm by trauma yet still insistently alive. It avoids the glossy look of many modern horror films and instead feels tactile, like something you could reach out and touch, though you wouldn't want to. What's impressive is how the cinematography integrates psychological nuance into its spatial design. The camera often frames Finney with too much headroom or too little breathing space, visually communicating his internal imbalance. Rooms feel slightly too large or slightly too small depending on his emotional state, a trick achieved through lens selection and deliberate staging. These choices create a living architecture of fear. It is not the environment that is haunted, it is Finney's perception of it. This psychological framing deepens the audience's connection to his trauma without ever verbalizing it. The sequences involving the spirit stand as some of the most thoughtfully crafted in modern supernatural horror. Rather than bathing the dead children in heavy CGI or exaggerated effects, the cinematography treats them almost like fragments of forgotten home movies. Their edges blur, their colors flatten, their movements feel slightly out of time, not theatrical, but melancholy. The camera lingers on them long enough for the viewer to see the remnants of childhood beneath their spectral forms. This choice creates a haunting tenderness that amplifies both fear and empathy. The use of practical effects over digital enhancements gives the film a grounded realism that increases its emotional intensity. Fog is real fog. Dust is real dust. Darkness is natural darkness shaped through lighting rather than filters. These tactile details carry weight on screen, allowing the cinematographer to compose frames that feel inhabited and imperfect, the opposite of a sterile, hyper-polished look that plagues many contemporary horror sequels. It's a decision that yields a strong return on investment. Practical visuals age better, feel more authentic, and resonate more deeply with audiences seeking emotional truth. Movement within the frame is carefully choreographed to create tension through rhythm rather than chaos. Instead of erratic cuts and frantic camera shakes, the cinematography builds dread through stillness interrupted by sudden, deliberate shifts. A chair moves slightly. A curtain sways without wind. A figure slides into the background while foreground objects remain undisturbed. These choices make the audience lean forward rather than recoil, which is a sign of well-constructed suspense. Horror is not about forcing reaction, it's about seducing attention. The cinematographer also demonstrates strong financial awareness in how scenes are visually designed. Limited locations are filmed from multiple angles, using depth, shadow, and focus shift to make spaces feel larger and more dynamic than they actually are. This is efficient filmmaking, stretching production value without inflating the budget. The result is a film that looks more expensive than it is, using creativity as a currency to purchase atmosphere. Ultimately, the visual language of Black Phone 2 succeeds because it aligns perfectly with the psychological core of the story. Cinematography is not decoration here, it is storytelling. It illuminates Finney's internal battles, gives voice to the spirit's unspoken grief, and transforms ordinary spaces into emotional landscapes shaped by memory and fear. This is horror filmmaking at its most refined, patient, intentional, and deeply human. The camera doesn't simply show the nightmare, it shares it. The sound design of Black Phone 2 is built around an elegant paradox. It is loudest when it is quiet. This film understands something that many horror sequels forget. Sound is not the seasoning, it is a substance. From the very first scene, the auditory world begins shaping the emotional architecture long before the visuals take over. You hear the film before you fully see it, and this creates a psychological imprint that stays with the viewer. The soundscape feels like a living ecosystem of unease, full of low-frequency murmurs, distant mechanical hums, and the kind of silence that tightens around the ribs like a slowly closing fist. The filmmakers use silence as if it were a physical object. Rather than filling empty spaces with overbearing music or sudden stingers, they allow the absence of sound to become a character in the story. In this universe, silence is never comfortable. It is a vacuum that swallows safety. The spaces between breaths, between footsteps, between the slow crackle of the phone line are carefully measured and placed so that the viewer begins anticipating sounds that may never come. It's a masterclass in negative auditory space, the cinematic equivalent of a heartbeat you can feel but cannot hear. The phone itself, the narrative anchor, is given a unique sonic signature. Instead of a typical ringtone, the sound team crafts something textured and organic, like a cross between an old rotary phone's ring and a distant metallic echo. It feels less like a call and more like a memory trying to claw its way back into the present. Each ring is layered with subtle distortions, as though time itself were trembling. This transforms a simple act of the phone ringing into a full-bodied emotional event. When it sounds off, the audience reacts instinctively, not intellectually, because the sonic frequency bypasses thought and goes straight to the nervous system. The voice recordings of the spirits are designed with extraordinary restraint. Rather than making them obviously ghostly, the sound design leans into realism. Whispers that feel like they were captured on failing equipment, breaths that are slightly too close to the microphone, pauses are too long to be natural but too short to be theatrical. This grounded approach gives the voices a documentary-like authenticity. It feels less like the supernatural speaking and more like trauma preserved in audio form, replaying itself over and over. The result is more unsettling than any exaggerated distortion could offer. Ambient sound plays a crucial role in shaping the psychological tension throughout the film. Hallways hum. Floors creak with inconsistent rhythms. Windows let in winds that do not sound external but internal, like emotional draft from a past that has not yet finished grieving. Even everyday objects, a dripping faucet, a refrigerator motor, the scrape of a chair, are recorded with heightened clarity, making the ordinary feel intrusive. This approach draws from the philosophy that horror thrives when familiarity becomes foreign. When everyday sound betray the environment, the listener becomes acutely aware of every acoustic detail. The mixing architecture is guided by a slow-build philosophy. Instead of overwhelming the audience with layered sound effects, the mix gradually expands and contracts, like breathing. The audio engineers treat the soundscape as a living organism with its own pulse and rhythm. During moments of emotional vulnerability, the mix thins out, isolating singular sounds, a breath, a whisper, a soft thud, to make the viewer lean in. During moments of danger, the sound thickens, becoming denser, almost suffocating, as if the world itself were pressing inward. This dynamic range management is done with an impressive level of emotional intelligence. The score, composed with restrained elegance, complements the film without overpowering it. Instead of leaning on typical horror tropes like screeching violins or booming percussion, the music is built around textures, bowed metals, low drones, uneasy synth pads, and soft, trembling strings. Melodies rarely fully resolve. They hover like unfinished thoughts. The composer understands that fear in this film is not explosive, it is cumulative. So the music accumulates too, layering tension gradually, like sediment settling at the bottom of a lake. Every note feels weighted with memory. One of the most striking musical techniques is the use of fragmented motifs. Rather than giving the film a single, iconic leitmotif, the composer breaks it into pieces, small melodic fragments that recur in different forms throughout the movie. Sometimes these fragments are stretched, sometimes reversed, sometimes reduced to a mere rhythmic pulse. This fragmentation mirrors Finney's internal world. Memories broken, fears scattered, identity in the process of recomposing itself. When these fragments finally converge near the end of the film, there's a quiet but powerful emotional release, a reminder that healing often sounds like something slowly becoming whole. The film uses diegetic sound with exceptional creativity. Radios play songs that seem slightly detuned, classroom chatter echoes longer than it should, and distant street noises feel like they traveled too far to sound that close. These subtle manipulations create the feeling that the world is slightly out of alignment, not enough to register consciously, but enough to make the subconscious uneasy. It's an economical way to create dread, bending sound just slightly off reality so the audience senses something is wrong without being able to articulate it. One of the finest moments in the sound design involves a layering of overlapping whispers that carry emotional clarity despite their distortion. The voices of the lost children merge into one another, forming a fragile chorus that feels both protective and haunted. The mixing keeps their words distinguishable but faint, creating a sense of shared suffering and collective memory. This moment becomes a deeply human reminder that trauma may isolate individuals, but it also connects them in ways that transcend the physical world. The sound team demonstrates remarkable financial efficiency. Instead of relying on expensive, large-scale sound effects libraries or extravagant recording sessions, they build tension with simplicity. Most of the horror stems from expertly captured environmental sounds, carefully processed vocal work, and measured silence. This proved that great sound design is not about cost. It is about intention, patience, and emotional insight. The return on investment comes through emotion, not extravagance. Ultimately, the sound design and music of Black Phone 2 create a holistic auditory experience that intertwines with the film's emotional spine. The sound does not accompany the story, it translates it. It becomes an interpreter of fear, memory, and the fragile hope that threads through the narrative. When the phone rings, when the silence expands, when the music trembles, the audience is not merely watching horror, they are hearing it breathe. The financial architecture behind Black Phone 2 is as quiet and calculated as a film's own suspense. In the modern era of horror filmmaking, studios increasingly lean on mid-budget projects because they offer one of the most consistent ROI profiles in the entire entertainment industry. The Black Phone 2021 was a classic example of this, turning a modest budget into a major global success. Its sequel follows the same strategic blueprint, a production designed not merely to entertain but to maximize financial efficiency, minimize capital risk, and ensure multi-platform longevity. In many ways, the film is a study in how intelligent budgeting becomes a form of creative fuel. Although the exact production budget for Black Phone 2 has not been publicly disclosed at the time of this review, horror films of this scale typically operate in the approximate $15 to $25 million range. This is what the industry calls a controlled mid-budget zone, where the investment is large enough to secure strong talent, atmospheric production design, and high-quality sound work, yet small enough to avoid the dangerous exposure often associated with blockbuster filmmaking. Blumhouse, known for its micro to mid-budget strategy, understands that profitability is not driven by spectacle. It is driven by efficiency. Horror, after all, is one of the few genres where less is more, both artistically and financially. The timeline management reflects this fiscal discipline. Principal photography is usually kept tight, often around 30 to 40 days, with minimal location jumping and sets designed for atmospheric reuse. This is not simply a creative choice but a scheduling and logistics strategy. Every extra day of shooting inflates costs, crew overtime, equipment rentals, location fees, insurance extensions, and catering increases. By keeping the shooting calendar focused and compact, the studio protects a budget from deviation, ensuring financial predictability, a crucial factor when investors evaluate project risk profiles. Marketing for Black Phone 2 follows a hybrid model, a blend of traditional awareness campaigns and highly targeted digital strategies. Horror is one of the most algorithm-friendly genres on the internet, thriving on trailer reactions, TikTok edits, and suspense-driven clips. The marketing team leveraged this by releasing short, high-emotion teasers designed not to explain the plot, but to create a sensory response. A ringing phone in a dark room, a child whispering, a shadow shifting. These microassets cost little to produce but deliver massive organic reach, making them a form of emotional A/B testing with the audience. The trailer campaigns lean heavily into viewer psychology. Instead of revealing new monsters or heavy plot expansions, the trailers use restrained storytelling. This is intentional. Mystery increases audience curiosity, and curiosity increases conversion rates on opening weekend. Horror marketing is built on delayed revelation, letting speculation generate the kind of unpaid buzz that studios normally have to purchase through high CPM ad buys. By releasing less information, the studio buys more attention. It's a counterintuitive but powerful marketing mechanic. Key art and poster design use minimalistic imagery, the mask, the phone, the silhouette. These are not just props, they are brand assets. Horror franchises thrive when they create a recognizable visual identity, something that can live on merchandise, streaming thumbnails, billboards, steelbooks, and viral fan art. A simple, iconic symbol becomes an unlimited licensing opportunity. The mask from the Black Phone already achieved cultural penetration in 2021. The sequel compounds that value, extending the brand into long-term collectible markets. A significant portion of the film's ROI potential lies in its release strategy. Horror sequels perform well in theaters because group viewing amplifies emotional response. Screams create more screams. Gasps create more gasps. This social contagion effect increases ticket sales and repeat viewing. Once the theatrical window closes, the film transitions into digital rentals, a high-margin revenue stream, followed by streaming deals. With Comcast and Universal's ownership pipeline, Peacock becomes a likely home for long-term streaming, where the film continues generating subscriber retention value. Each stage multiplies the original investment, even before international sales and licensing are factored in. International markets represent another major ROI pillar. Horror transcends language barriers better than almost any other genre because it relies on atmosphere, fear response, and universal psychological triggers. Subtitles do not diminish tension. Cultural translation is minimal. As a result, horror films often achieve stronger overseas-to-budget ratios than domestic rom-coms or dramas. Black Phone 2 benefits from the global success of the first film, which already established a worldwide fan base. Sequels reduce marketing friction because audience familiarity lowers customer acquisition costs. Ancillary revenue adds further depth to profitability. Home entertainment sales remain a powerful long-tail market, especially for horror, where fans value collectible editions, commentary tracks, behind-the-scenes breakdowns, and alternative artwork. Steel books, vinyl soundtracks, and branded props, like replica phones or mass variations, become passion-driven purchases with extremely high margins. This is where the film subtly transitions from movie to merchandise ecosystem, generating revenue years after its theatrical run ends. Something often overlooked is how the sound design, production design, and cinematography contribute to cost efficiency. By leaning heavily on atmospheric tension rather than expensive large-scale set pieces, the filmmakers preserve capital while increasing emotional payoff. The economic philosophy is clear. Fear is cheaper than spectacle but often far more satisfying. A shadow costs less than a CGI creature, but it lingers longer in the mind. This alignment between creative intention and fiscal intelligence is what gives the film such strong long-term financial health. From a financial analysis perspective, Black Phone 2 represents an optimal balance of controlled spending and scalable revenue. The break-even threshold for a $20 million horror film is significantly lower than for a $100 million action movie. Add modest marketing costs, likely around approximate $20 to $30 million globally, and the film still lands comfortably in the profitable zone if it hits even moderate box office numbers. Streaming boosts profitability further, as platforms now purchase films partly based on predictive retention analytics. Horror is especially valuable here because it generates spikes in week-one engagement metrics, something streaming services actively pay for. Investors favor horror because of its stability, and sequels offer the highest stability within that stability. A known IP with a proven aesthetic and audience means risk is mitigated at almost every stage. The franchise model transforms what might have once been a one-off supernatural thriller into a renewable financial instrument, an asset that compounds value with each installment. If the film performs well, Black Phone 3 becomes not just likely but economically rational. Ultimately, the financial story of Black Phone 2 is one of disciplined filmmaking. It's a reminder that you do not need excessive budgets to craft emotionally powerful cinema. Instead, you need clarity of vision, precision in spending, and the courage to let atmosphere do the heavy lifting. This is a film where every dollar is placed with intention, every marketing beat is designed for efficiency, and every distribution step is structured to maximize long-term revenue. And in that careful orchestration, the film becomes not only a work of art but a finely tuned financial machine, proof that horror remains one of the smartest investments in modern Hollywood. The marketing strategy behind Black Phone 2 is a beautiful blend of psychological precision and data-driven engineering. In today's entertainment ecosystem, simply advertising a horror movie is no longer enough. Studios must engineer anticipation the way tech companies engineer product launches. Universal and Blumhouse approached this sequel not as a film, but as a behavioral event, mapping the emotional rhythms of the audience with the analytical rigor of a financial portfolio. Every trailer beat, every poster reveal, every social teaser is intentionally calibrated to stimulate curiosity, fear, and nostalgia in perfect synchrony. The first wave of marketing begins long before the trailer drops, through what industry strategists call low-touch curiosity seeding. This includes cryptic promotional images, brief production stills, and carefully timed cast interviews that release just enough information to activate existing fan memory while inviting speculation from new viewers. Horror marketing thrives on the tension between what is shown and what is withheld, and Black Phone 2 leverages this principle with discipline. The early posters featuring only the iconic mask or the isolated phone do more than imply plot. They signal brand continuity. In marketing terms, this reduces cognitive friction, making audiences far more likely to re-engage. When the official teaser arrives, it avoids over-disclosure. Instead of summarizing plot, it prioritizes sensory triggers: the ringing phone, the muffled whisper, the shifting shadows. Each of these elements is chosen not for narrative value, but for emotional velocity. The editors behind the trailer understand that the human brain is far more responsive to fear cues and to exposition. As a result, the teaser behaves like a psychological algorithm, compressing the essence of dread into short, shareable content optimized for retention. From a marketing analytics viewpoint, this is high-efficiency emotional advertising. Digital marketing plays a foundational role in the visibility of the film. Short-form platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts receive microclips specifically designed to hook viewers in under 3 seconds, the crucial threshold for audience drop-off. These microclips function as A/B tests in real time. If a clip featuring a whisper performs better than one showing a silhouette, the algorithm signals that viewers resonate more with auditory suspense than visual threat. This allows the marketing team to dynamically adjust their campaign, focusing on the types of stimuli that generate the highest engagement per second ratio. Social listening tools contribute another layer of intelligence. By tracking keywords, hashtags, reaction videos, and fan theories, the studio gathers emotional sentiment data that shapes subsequent advertising waves. If audiences express fascination with a mask, the marketing pivots toward mask-centric visuals. If viewers fixate on the phone as a symbolic object, sound-based teasers increase. This creates a feedback loop where the audience effectively co-authors the marketing trajectory. In business terms, this is a prime example of adaptive customer acquisition, where emotional analytics guide creative adjustment. Influencer partnerships amplify the film's reach without requiring blockbuster budgets. Horror influencers on TikTok and YouTube create reaction videos, breakdowns of franchise lore, and handheld in-the-dark challenges that replicate the atmosphere of film. These creators are not merely advertisement channels, they are cultural translators. They turn fear into shareable content, transforming audience anticipation into a social ritual. Because influencer audiences trust creator sincerity more than studio messaging, these partnerships produce high conversion awareness at a fraction of traditional CPM costs. The film also benefits from strategic timing. Releasing promotional materials near Halloween or during horror-friendly seasons increases organic interest. Audiences are more receptive to fear-driven content when cultural ambience aligns with the emotional tone of the movie. Studios leverage this seasonal psychology because it boosts algorithmic performance. Posts shared during horror seasons receive higher engagement rates, improving visibility without additional spend. This is marketing efficiency disguised as atmospheric synchronicity. Traditional promotional channels remain essential. Theatrical trailers attached to genre-adjacent films, TV spots aired during darker primetime hours, and strategically placed billboards target viewers who may not be online but still respond strongly to censor-driven advertising. For example, a billboard that displays only the phone and the tagline creates a lasting impression through simplicity. Viewers fill in the narrative gap subconsciously, turning minimalism into memorability. In marketing terms, this is emotional compounding, a psychological effect where the brain invests additional thought into incomplete stimuli. One of the most financially intelligent components of the marketing campaign is its data-backed audience segmentation. The studio divides viewers into clusters: original film loyalists, general horror fans, thriller enthusiasts, supernatural horror seekers, and casual streamers. Each cluster receives tailored advertising. Loyalists receive nostalgic content, emphasizing continuity with the first film. Thriller fans see tension-driven clips. Supernatural horror audiences see more ethereal imagery. Streamers see shorter, binge-friendly visuals that promise narrative clarity. This segmentation increases efficiency by reducing wasted impressions, ensuring that marketing dollars reach the viewers most likely to convert. Post-release analytics extend the campaign well beyond opening weekend. Studios monitor reactions, cinema audience recordings, where permitted, review sentiment, and sustain streaming behavior to determine which sequences resonate most powerfully. They then release behind-the-scenes clips, direct-to-commentary segments, or music featurettes based on popular demand. This prolongs a film's cultural conversation and increases long-tail engagement, a crucial factor for horror films transitioning into their streaming windows. In financial terms, this is extended emotional retention, where each new content drop refreshes the movie's relevance. Earned media, the news articles, interviews, podcasts, and fan theories generated without direct studio spending, is a major component of the film's marketing ROI. The first film's success created a reservoir of brand credibility, so the sequel benefits from ongoing coverage from entertainment creators eager to discuss the evolution of the franchise. Earned media is one of the highest value forms of exposure because it costs nothing and often performs better than paid advertising due to perceived authenticity. Even the soundtrack releases are strategically timed. By dropping haunting tracks or specific audio motifs before the film's premiere, the studio activates emotional memory through sonic repetition. Fans begin associating the sounds with anticipation, making the theater experience feel like the conclusion of a psychological journey. This is emotional marketing in its most elegant form, using sound as a bridge between promotional engagement and cinematic emotion. Taken together, the marketing strategy of Black Phone 2 is a brilliant synthesis of psychology and analytics. It proves that successful horror promotion is not about volume, it is about precision. Every visual is curated for impact, every sound cue chosen for its subconscious resonance, every digital asset designed for maximum retention. Through data-guided creativity and measured emotional storytelling, the film not only reaches audiences but follows them, understanding their fears, their curiosities, and their viewing habits with cinematic empathy. It is, in every sense, a marketing campaign built as intelligently as a film it supports. Traditional promotional channels remain essential. Theatrical trailers attached to genre-adjacent films, TV spots aired during darker primetime hours, and strategically placed billboards target viewers who may not be online but still respond strongly to censor-driven advertising. For example, a billboard that displays only the phone and the tagline creates a lasting impression through simplicity. Viewers fill in the narrative gap subconsciously, turning minimalism into memorability. In marketing terms, this is emotional compounding, a psychological effect where the brain invests additional thought into incomplete stimuli. One of the most financially intelligent components of the marketing campaign is its data-backed audience segmentation. The studio divides viewers into clusters: original film loyalists, general horror fans, thriller enthusiasts, supernatural horror seekers, and casual streamers. Each cluster receives tailored advertising. Loyalists receive nostalgic content, emphasizing continuity with the first film. Thriller fans see tension-driven clips. Supernatural horror audiences see more ethereal imagery. Streamers see shorter, binge-friendly visuals that promise narrative clarity. This segmentation increases efficiency by reducing wasted impressions, ensuring that marketing dollars reach the viewers most likely to convert. Post-release analytics extend the campaign well beyond opening weekend. Studios monitor reactions, cinema audience recordings, where permitted, review sentiment, and sustain streaming behavior to determine which sequences resonate most powerfully. They then release behind-the-scenes clips, direct-to-commentary segments, or music featurettes based on popular demand. This prolongs a film's cultural conversation and increases long-tail engagement, a crucial factor for horror films transitioning into their streaming windows. In financial terms, this is extended emotional retention, where each new content drop refreshes the movie's relevance. Earned media, the news articles, interviews, podcasts, and fan theories generated without direct studio spending, is a major component of the film's marketing ROI. The first film's success created a reservoir of brand credibility, so the sequel benefits from ongoing coverage from entertainment creators eager to discuss the evolution of the franchise. Earned media is one of the highest value forms of exposure because it costs nothing and often performs better than paid advertising due to perceived authenticity. Even the soundtrack releases are strategically timed. By dropping haunting tracks or specific audio motifs before the film's premiere, the studio activates emotional memory through sonic repetition. Fans begin associating the sounds with anticipation, making the theater experience feel like the conclusion of a psychological journey. This is emotional marketing in its most elegant form, using sound as a bridge between promotional engagement and cinematic emotion. Taken together, the marketing strategy of Black Phone 2 is a brilliant synthesis of psychology and analytics. It proves that successful horror promotion is not about volume, it is about precision. Every visual is curated for impact, every sound cue chosen for its subconscious resonance, every digital asset designed for maximum retention. Through data-guided creativity and measured emotional storytelling, the film not only reaches audiences but follows them, understanding their fears, their curiosities, and their viewing habits with cinematic empathy. It is, in every sense, a marketing campaign built as intelligently as a film it supports. The cultural impact of Black Phone 2 is rooted in the way it reclaims horror as a medium of emotional memory rather than simple shock value. Sequels often struggle to justify their existence, but this film does something rare. It deepens a cultural echo that was already resonant in audiences from the first installment. Instead of merely extending a storyline, it extends a feeling, a sense of unfinished whispers, unresolved grief, and the unsettling belief that the past can reach across time through static and silence. Cultural impact begins not with what a movie says, but what it awakens, and Black Phone 2 awakens the same primal vulnerability that made the original so unforgettable. Modern horror has been shifting from external monsters to internal metaphors, and this sequel contributes meaningfully to that trend. Audiences increasingly crave stories that mirror psychological realities, trauma, generational patterns, identity fragmentation, because these are the fears that live beneath everyday life. The film's use of the phone as a symbolic condor for communication with the dead is a metaphor that resonates across cultures and age groups, the longing to speak with those we've lost. In that sense, the movie reaches beyond typical genre limits and taps into universal emotional territory. As a result, its cultural impact extends far beyond horror fandom and enters broader conversations about grief, guilt, healing, and memory. In terms of cinematic legacy, this film strengthens the idea that horror can be intimate rather than spectacular. Hollywood often equates scale with significance, bigger creatures, louder scares, higher visual effects expenditure. But Black Phone 2 proves once again that small, emotionally charged details can leave a deeper cultural footprint than any CGI monster. The quiet sound of a phone ringing in an empty room becomes more terrifying and iconic than elaborate shock sequences. This minimalistic philosophy positions a franchise as a modern heir to classics like The Ring *, The Others *, and the Babadook *, where atmosphere carries more weight than spectacle. Culturally, the film's mask design continues to shape horror iconography. Masks in horror become cultural artifacts. Think of Ghostface, Michael Myers, or Leatherface. The mask in Black Phone 2 evolves subtly but intentionally, incorporating new emotional cues through its structure and texture. Horror fans dissect the nuances, cosplay communities recreate the designs, and social media aesthetics morph into mask-core visuals. The franchise knows that iconic imagery is a form of cultural permanence, and the mask becomes a symbolic shorthand for dread, much like the phone itself. Over time, these symbols contribute to the film's legacy by embedding themselves into collective horror vocabulary. A significant element of the film's cultural influence is the way it speaks to intergenerational trauma. Younger audiences, especially Gen Z, a generation deeply fluent in psychological language, respond strongly to stories that explore unresolved emotional inheritance. The film becomes a metaphor for cycles of harm and healing, portraying how the past refuses to remain buried when it has not been properly faced. TikTok discussions, YouTube video essays, and podcast analyses unravel these metaphors, bringing the movie into everyday mental health conversations. When a horror film becomes part of public discourse surrounding emotional resilience, you know it has transcended genre limitations and entered cultural consciousness. Financially, cultural impact translates into longevity, and Black Phone 2 positions itself well for long-term relevance. Films that resonate emotionally continue to earn revenue through extended streaming windows, merchandise, physical media collector's editions, and eventual franchise expansions. Cultural staying power is a form of financial compounding. The more a film is discussed, memed, analyzed, and revisited, the more value it extracts from each additional audience interaction. Horror films with this kind of emotional density often become evergreen assets, generating slow but steady returns over years rather than just opening weekend. The film also impacts the broader horror industry by validating low to mid-budget models that prioritize psychology over spectacle. Blumhouse built its empire on the idea that horror thrives when constrained. Constraints force creativity. Black Phone 2 reinforces his financial philosophy by demonstrating that a modest production budget paired with strong emotional storytelling can still yield blockbuster tension. Other studios observe this success and begin reconsidering investment strategies, shifting away from high-risk, high-effect horror and toward more intimate, psychologically grounded narratives. In this way, the film influences industry economics, shaping the next wave of horror production. Another cultural layer comes from how the film handles the supernatural. Unlike many horror movies that present ghosts as antagonistic forces, Black Phone 2 frames them as complex. The film's legacy is heightened by its narrative respect for adolescence. Stories about children surviving supernatural torment often risk objectifying trauma for entertainment. But this movie invests in the interiority of its young characters, portraying them not as victims but as resilient interpreters of fear. This approach resonates profoundly with younger audiences who feel overwhelmed by the uncertainties of the modern world, climate anxiety, social isolation, digital overstimulation. The protagonists represent emotional adaptability, and that image leaves a meaningful cultural imprint. Fear can be faced, not just fled. From a technological viewpoint, Black Phone 2 contributes to cultural legacy through its sound design. The acoustic language of the film, distorted static, faint knocks, soft ringing, becomes as recognizable as a score. Cultural impact often hides in sensory repetition. Audiences remember the feeling before they remember the plot. These sounds become triggers of dread, circulating through videos, memes, fan edits, and reaction compilations. When people hear a certain kind of old telephone ringing and immediately think of the movie, that is cultural imprint in its purest form. A film's legacy also depends on its generative power, how many conversations, creative works, or fan theories it inspires. Black Phone 2 stimulates a particularly enthusiastic form of generativity. Fans debate the rules of its supernatural world, analyze the motives of its spectral characters, and explore the psychological symbolism embedded in the narrative. This generative engagement ensures that the film continues to live outside the theater, expanding into a participatory cultural experience where audiences co-create meaning. When a film becomes a canvas for shared interpretation, its legacy stabilizes. Ultimately, the cultural impact of Black Phone 2 lies in its emotional duality, a horror film that terrifies while inviting introspection. It leaves behind not just images of fear but questions about how we confront the shadows of our own histories. In doing so, it solidifies its place not as a sequel chasing after the legacy of its predecessor, but as a compelling chapter in a growing mythos that blends psychological realism with supernatural storytelling. Over time, its influence will ripple outward, shaping conversations, creative expressions, and perhaps even future generations of horror filmmakers who learn that the most haunting stories are the ones that echo from within us. Black Phone 2 concludes its narrative journey not with an explosive finale but with a reflective pause, a space that allows the audience to breathe, absorb, and reconcile. The film's artistry lies in its patient construction. Every shadow, every whisper, every hesitant glance has been meticulously aligned with emotional, technological, and financial intent. Horror here is not a spectacle but a study in balance, where the creative vision harmonizes with production realities and audience psychology. This equilibrium demonstrates how art, tech, and capital can collaborate without compromising the integrity of the story. From a psychological perspective, the sequel offers a masterclass in human fear and resilience. Finney and Gwen are not merely protagonists. They are embodiments of emotional and behavioral economics. Each choice, each hesitation, each flicker of courage represents a negotiation of risk and reward, a cost-benefit analysis of survival. The filmmakers transform trauma into narrative currency, where every scare is underpinned by a meaningful human decision. This intertwining of internal conflict and plot mechanics elevates the horror beyond simple fright, rendering it both intellectually and emotionally compelling. Technologically, the film showcases how modern tools can amplify storytelling without overshadowing it. The cinematography, sound design, and production techniques are precise yet invisible, allowing viewers to become fully immersed in the universe without noticing the scaffolding that supports it. From IMAX-calibrated shots to subtle sound layering and controlled lighting, the technical execution mirrors the psychological tension on screen. It is a perfect demonstration of IOI and artistry, investing in technology not for spectacle but for immersive emotional impact. Financially, Black Phone 2 proves that discipline and strategic design can convert mid-budget horror into high-yield cinematic investments. The careful allocation of funds across production, marketing, and distribution maximizes revenue potential while minimizing risk. The calculated use of limited locations, practical effects, and digital innovation creates an emotional and visual richness far beyond the budget line. Combined with a layered marketing strategy targeting psychographic audience segments and leveraging social virality, the film exemplifies modern financial intelligence in Hollywood filmmaking. Artistically, the sequel honors the first film while pushing the franchise forward. It maintained continuity in tone, visual motifs, and narrative stakes, ensuring fans feel the weight of prior events. Simultaneously, it deepens character arcs, expands thematic resonance, and explores the psychological landscape of fear with new sophistication. This delicate balance between honoring legacy and innovating is rare in genre filmmaking, and is a testament to the cohesive vision guiding every creative and managerial decision. The emotional intelligence embedded in performances, design, and direction is matched by the film's cultural awareness. Horror is treated as a vehicle for conversation about grief, memory, and resilience rather than mere escapism. The sequel generates discussion across social media, fan communities, and critical discourse, extending its value beyond the theater. Cultural capital here becomes financial capital. Each fan interaction, discussion, or analysis contributes to long-term brand equity and franchise longevity. From a production standpoint, the film is a model of efficient management. Tight scheduling, clear hierarchy, and thoughtful resource allocation allow creative energy to flourish without wasting time or money. Each department operated in harmony, understanding that delays or mismanagement would compromise not only budgets but emotional and aesthetic consistency. In this sense, Black Phone 2 functions as a case study in how organizational discipline underpins creative freedom, demonstrating the often overlooked economic intelligence behind cinematic excellence. Narratively, the film reaffirms the value of restraint. Horror is most potent when anticipation outpaces revelation. By relying on psychological tension, environmental storytelling, and careful sound and visual cues, the filmmakers maximize emotional payoff with minimal explicit exposition. Each audience reaction, flinch, gasp, or hell breath, is a measure of the film's investment efficiency. The cost of producing fear is modest, but the emotional dividends are high. Technological, financial, and creative decisions converge to create an experience that is as intellectually stimulating as it is viscerally effective. Whether analyzing the use of shadows to signal trauma, the subtle layering of whispers to induce tension, or the smart budget allocation that allowed multiple marketing touchpoints, the film rewards both emotional engagement and analytical attention. Viewers leave with a sense of satisfaction, not only from narrative resolution but from witnessing production in which every choice is intentional and every element contributes to a coherent whole. Ultimately, Black Phone 2 serves as a blueprint for modern horror filmmaking, demonstrating that a movie can be terrifying, emotionally rich, financially intelligent, and technologically sophisticated simultaneously. It is a reminder that art and commerce are not inherently antagonistic. They are complementary forces when guided by thoughtful leadership, psychological insight, and disciplined creativity. The franchise's continued success lies in its ability to integrate these dimensions seamlessly, creating fear that lingers not only in the mind but also in cultural memory and financial metrics. As we close this deep dive, it becomes clear that Black Phone 2 is more than a sequel. It is a masterclass in balance. Fear, finance, and technology do not compete. They harmonize. The movie teaches that understanding human psychology, optimizing production resources, and embracing technological tools can elevate storytelling to levels that resonate emotionally, commercially, and culturally. It is a rare convergence of intellect and intuition, calculation and empathy, artistry and strategy. If you found this exploration illuminating, my fellow cinephiles, may this journey through Black Phone 2 inspire you to see horror not just as entertainment, but as an intricate dialogue between emotion, innovation, and intelligent filmmaking, a space where every shadow, every whisper, and every pause carries a weight of deliberate design.